Tonight?
A family is speaking through grief as Columbus police release a new timeline in the brutal murder of a dentist and his wife and update that. Raises as many questions as it answers. This isn't just a list of times and events. It's a window into what investigators believe matters most. And what may still be missing. As emotions collide with evidence, the timeline may quietly reveal how this crime unfolded and where the truth could be hiding. Before we break it all down, take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe for continued, responsible true crime coverage. And in the comments, let me know your thoughts on this case and where you're watching from. Your engagement helps keep these stories visible and pushes them closer to justice. For those just learning about this case, here's what we know so far. Spencer Teepe, a respected dentist, and his wife, Mon'nique Teepe, were found shot to death inside their Columbus, Ohio home. The discovery was made after a welfare check was requested when Spencer failed to show up for work a highly. Unusual absence that immediately raised concern among his colleagues. When officers entered the home, they found both victims deceased. Their 2 young children were located inside the house, alive and physically unharmed. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, and no firearm was recovered at the scene. From the very beginning, investigators made it clear this was being treated as a homicide. Yet despite national attention and growing public concern, Columbus police released very little information in the early days of the investigation, citing its active and sensitive nature. That silence made the newly released timeline especially significant because timelines are never released. Unless investigators believe the sequence of events matters. And now, with that timeline made public, the family is responding, while the public is left trying to understand what it all means. According to Columbus police, the timeline of this case begins in the late overnight hours and stretches into the following morning creating. A wide and critical window of time. Investigators say the murders are believed to have occurred sometime between midnight and 9 o'clock. A.M. That 9-hour span is not accidental. It represents the period in which detectives believe the suspect or suspects had both access and opportunity. Officers were dispatched to the home to conduct a welfare check after concerns were raised when Spencer Teepe did not arrive at work and could not be reached. Upon entry, police discovered both Spencer and Mon'nique deceased inside the residence. Police confirmed there were no obvious signs of forced entry. No gun was found at the scene. At some point during that overnight window, the shooter entered, committed the murders, and left undetected. In the days that followed, investigators focused heavily on surveillance footage, including cameras on the home and throughout the surrounding neighborhood. When that initial review did not immediately produce a suspect, police expanded their request, asking the public for any video, photos, or digital evidence from a large surrounding area during the overnight hours. This timeline long,
Quiet.
and still incomplete is now the backbone of the investigation. And it's also what the family is reacting to. From an investigative standpoint, this timeline is both revealing and concerning. A 9-hour window suggests investigators do not yet have a precise time of death. That usually means there were no immediate alert snow alarms triggered, no emergency calls made, and no witnesses who heard or reported anything unusual during the night. The lack of forced entry tells analysts one of 2 things. Either the home was accessible during that time, or the person responsible was able to enter without resistance. In homicide investigations, that detail alone dramatically narrows the field. The missing firearm is another critical point. This tells investigators the weapon was brought to the scene and intentionally removed. That action requires forethought. It also suggests the offender understood, at least at a basic level, how evidence connects crimes to suspects. What stands out most is the time itself.
Overnight.
Crimes inside occupied homes are inherently risky. That risk is usually taken only when the offender believes they won't be. Interrupted or when they feel confident enough to take their time. From an expert lens, this timeline does not point to randomness. It points to control, familiarity, and planning even if the motive remains unclear. And as investigators analyze these hours minute by minute, the family is doing something equally difficult, responding publicly while waiting for answers that may not yet exist. As police released this timeline, the family of Spencer and Mon'nique Teepe issued a statement that was both heartbreaking and deliberate. They described the murders as senseless and tragic, emphasizing that Spencer and Mon'nique were extraordinary people whose lives were defined by love, joy, and deep connections to others. Their words were not focused on anger or speculation, but on who these two people were before they were reduced to a case file. The family spoke of Spencer as a devoted father, a loving partner, and someone who dedicated his life to serving others. Mon'nique was remembered as a patient, joyful mother whose warmth shaped her family and those around her. Together, they were described as deeply happy, proud parents who shared a strong and loving bond. Notably, the family's statement did not assign blame or point fingers. Instead, it centered on grief, remembrance, and a commitment to seeing this case handled fully and fairly. From an analytical standpoint, that matters. Families are often advised to speak carefully in active investigations to protect the integrity of the case and the future of any prosecution. The restraint shown here suggests a focus on justice, not public pressure. As the family mourns privately, the timeline now becomes public and with it. The weight of waiting shifts not just to investigators, but to the community watching closely. Alongside the release of the timeline, there has been something just as noticeable: what police are choosing not to disclose. Columbus police have declined on-camera interviews and have repeatedly stated that, due to the active nature of the investigation, they have no additional updates to provide. While that can be frustrating for the public, from an investigative standpoint, it's often intentional. When law enforcement limits details, it usually means one of three things. First, they may be protecting information only the perpetrator would know. Second, they may be actively vetting tips, digital evidence, or interviews that could be compromised by public speculation. Or third, they may be building a case that relies on timing, movement, or behavioral evidence details that lose value once widely known. The expanded request for public video across a large geographic area is another subtle signal. It suggests investigators believe movement, possibly by vehicle matters in this case, even if they are not ready to say how. Silence does not mean inactivity. In many homicide cases, it means detectives are working behind the scenes, carefully assembling pieces they are not yet prepared to show. Even with the timeline now public, several critical questions remain. Who had access to the home during those overnight hours? Why that specific window of time? What caused investigators to widen their search area so significantly? And perhaps, most importantly, what evidence exists that the public hasn't seen? There is also the unresolved question of timing. Narrowing the time of death is often essential in identifying suspects, verifying alibis, and tracking movements. Until that window tightens, many answers remain just out of reach. These are not accusations. They are the same questions investigators and analysts ask quietly as they work toward clarity. As of now, the investigation remains active and ongoing. No suspects have been publicly named, and no arrests have been announced. The Teepe children are in the care of relatives, surrounded by family during an unimaginable loss. Investigators continue reviewing digital evidence, surveillance footage, and tips from the public. Police are still urging anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. It's important to remember that behind every timeline and headline are real people, parents, children, and loved ones whose lives have been permanently changed. Responsible true crime coverage seeks truth without turning tragedy into entertainment. Speculation helps no one. Facts, patience, and accountability do. As this case continues to unfold, the timeline released by police may be only the beginning, not the conclusion. Justice for Spencer and Mon'nique Teepe will depend on evidence, diligence, and time. And until answers come, their story deserves to be told with care, accuracy, and respect. I'm Detective B. If you're fascinated by real life, mysteries, and criminal investigations, tap like, subscribe, and share your opinion in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what you think about today's case. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant. And remember, in true crime, the line between fact and perception is often thinner than we realize.